the Javier Novoa Podcast. Prosperity, liberty, and peace. Now, here's your host, Javier Novoa.
That's right, guys, the Javier Novoa Podcast. We are live now from Dallas, Texas, and this is a podcast about current events, about all things politics, freedom, libertarianism, prosperity, and health, all given to you by the real Javier Novoa. We're also going to put it on the Geopolitical Investing Cafe. Thanks for joining us today, guys, and it's an interesting news day. I just wanted to go through some of the stories here. Inverse fear reigns. Bargain puts for the brave. The markets have been up. Stocks have been up. And it seems like anytime it's not Armageddon, the market just makes new record highs. And it really lends itself to those people who say just buy the SPY, buy the S&P 500 index and hold that, and you'll always multiply your money. Shoot, buy some leveraged ETFs on the SPY or buy some options, and you should really make money. Leads me to question a lot of the Austrians like Peter Schiff, like Jim Rogers and others who keep saying that we're going to have a correction. I know according to economic law that has to happen. I know according to the value investors, all of these stocks with 50, 100 PE ratios should not be that high and should not keep going higher, but they do. Does technology have something to do with that? Do intangibles come into play? My question is, and I don't know this, guys, if you have any comments, please put this in the comments. Because again, I come from an Austrian background. I still know that those are the bases of economic law. I have studied some finance. I am an investor, and I have studied value investing. But it just seems to me that value investing hasn't really worked according to its tenets for a long time. Of course, one of the tenets of value investing is finding cheap stocks. How do you find a cheap stock that's above 50 PE ratio? I remember Monish Pabrai was talking about find companies with a PE ratio of 1. And it's easier to do that if you're in Turkey or a third world country. It's easier to do that if you're in private equity. But how do you take a position as a value investor in this market? I don't know. That's why I don't take a position as a value investor. That's why I'm more into trying to find trends. I'm more into intuitive investing. We did have an interview, by the way, with the author of the book, The Intuitive Investor, Jason Apollo Voss. In fact, we've been trying to get him on the podcast. He's a very busy man. He's actually the CEO of an AI company. I think it's called Deception and Truth, which tracks deception in literature, modern literature. He was a big investment guy. He worked for an investment fund, made millions of dollars, and retired, I believe, at 36. But of course, he couldn't stay retired. He said he was becoming boring for his wife, and so she sent him back to work. Now he's working in AI. But this guy wrote a book called The Intuitive Investor, and he gave a lot of the soft knowledge, so to speak, of investing, how to get a feel for it, because according to him, and it makes sense to me, and it's worked for me, everybody has the numbers, right? He said in the interview, you don't have any stupid people working on Wall Street. You don't have people that don't know what a PE ratio is. You don't have people that don't know what the jargon is. Everybody knows that. So you have to know that. That's an entry condition, according to him. Now, according to Chris Camillo and others, that's not even an entry condition, and I can testify to that too. But at any rate, what differentiates the great investor now is going to be that unseen edge. It's going to be the ability to tap into your intuition, the ability to tap into your emotions, there are a lot of techniques in there for that. I try to do that with my investing, and actually I've come out pretty well. As you know, we did invest in Jack in the Box last year, and that stock, I rode it from $50 to $19 a share. But because of the intuitive edge, what I did was I bought call options last year before a lot of the earnings calls, and they always went up just because Jack in the Box did not do as badly as the analysts thought. And then what I did recently, a few weeks ago, I bought put options on Jack in the Box. It's now down to about 1690, or excuse me, 1790. It was down to 16 something, and those put options are doing very well. So I'm actually up in our Jack in the Box investment, but you've got to think around corners. You've got to think outside the box. So you can't just buy a stock and hold that and then let that be all. You've got to figure out, okay, what are other ways I can make money in the periphery of this? And I think that ties into a lot of intuitive investing. Why am I talking about this? Well, the markets are just euphoric today and this week. And I'm thinking until Trump does something crazy or until there's another Armageddon like scenario, stocks are going to continue going up. I know a lot of investors would say we're back in NVIDIA. I think Palantir. In fact, let's pull up Palantir because I'm not even sure what the price is today. Let me see here. I like FinViz. FinViz is an AI stock screener, and it's free. I like using it. And let's pull up here where Palantir is. So Palantir, you see, Palantir is becoming embedded in the whole nation state, whether that's military operations like we saw in Iran. It was aiding the United States and Israeli intelligence in finding members of the Iranian government. I don't know if I like what they're doing. Oh, they're up. It is going to be what it originally was and still is it's training companies to integrate AI systems that save them a ton of money. So Palantir could become omnipresent here. It could be, if not the only major player, one of the major players in this brave new world that's coming up that nobody really has any idea where we're going. It's at 136.32 today. It's up 4.27% today. And it is one of those that one questions, how do you value a tech company? I know Warren Buffett said that he did not invest in tech, although Berkshire did invest in some tech later on. But as a rule, when he was starting out, Warren Buffett did not invest in tech because he did not have the knowledge of tech. But it begs the question now that tech is going to be permeating every single company. How do you avoid it? And is there a tech premium in the price to earnings ratio? That is, in a normal company, many people would say that 10 is a pretty good PE ratio. But is there an added layer of cost that or an added layer of value that we have to allow? In a tech company, it would seem empirically over the last few years that that is the case. Of course, we've had Jim Rogers on a lot on the podcast. We just had an interview with him a few days ago. And he talks about the fact that even the great technologies of the past, like radio, railroads, well, the stocks and companies associated with them went up astronomically. And then it was a huge bubble and it burst. There's always a fear that there's a bubble. And as George Soros said, when there's a bubble, I buy. So when does the bubble burst? I think that's where smart people can make their money, figuring out when that bubble bursts and figuring out when to get out. There's a great book called The Zurich Axioms, and it was written by a journalist, but it was about the rules or the axioms that bankers in Switzerland conducted their lives and their business by. And one of them was get out too soon, take your profits too soon. Now, I've heard the opposite of this. On Wall Street, it is a known dictum. It says cut your losses and ride your profits. But the question is, what mechanism do you have to predict whether those profits will keep going? And there's a lot of talk about that. But what the Swiss bankers do was they set a profit and they took their profit too soon. And that's a safe way to, I believe, navigate these bubbles. Again, not investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor. That's what's going on today, at least. Those are the salient things that are going on in Wall Street. I like this article on Zero Hedge. It says, the decline and fall of our so-called degreed experts. And I've always known that expertise was a sort of magical, illogical, or even farcical pathway that we basically attribute expertise to people who are fallible in our society. We think that expertise is some kind of divine infallibility like they gave to the popes of old. And there are many people, and it's strange that the left has adopted this expert worship. The problem with expert worship is you're not accounting, first of all, for the huge gap in knowledge that we still have, the lack of knowledge. We could not know everything that was pertinent to a subject because everything is connected in the universe. We couldn't know everything in the universe. That would be impossible. So, of course, empirically, there are people who are good at a certain thing. They're good at a certain discipline. But to worship them as experts, I believe, is foolhardy, especially if you're going to take an empirical stance. And scientists of old traditionally have actually noted that it was a fallacy to follow authority. In fact, they call it the appeal to authority fallacy. Just because authority says it doesn't mean it's true, guys. And I think that is something that we have forgotten, especially those people who claim to believe in scientism. Of course, scientism is the worship of science, the philosophy that quote unquote science is the final arbiter. Is it? We have to go into definitions. Of course, we don't have time to do that on this podcast, but we could go into the philosophy of science. We could go into Karl Popper and what makes an empirical proposition, shall we say, valid, is that it is falsifiable. Therefore, any proposition in science to hold up as a proposition must be falsifiable. So by definition, there's a possibility of it being falsified. So when someone says, oh, the science is settled on this, that's a fallacious statement. But anyway, it says, and this is from Davis Hansen via American Greatness, the first 6 months of the Trump administration have not been kind to the experts and the degree-holding classes. Almost daily during the tariff hysterias of March, we were told by university economists and most of the PhDs employed in investment and finance that the U.S. was headed toward a downward, if not recessionary spiral. Now, I have to take the other position on this as well, because we know economically that tariffs, all things being equal according to economic theory, are detrimental. We also know that the fallacy that in world trade, it is popular to say that the United States is trading with China, but the United States is not trading with China. People living in the United States and working in the United States are trading with people living and working in China. Therefore, the Austrian stance and the libertarian stance would be that there need be no policy, no trade policy. So a lot of this is just smoke and mirrors. I disagree with the tariffs, but as the author of the article notes, a lot of people have been predicting for a long time that, oh, the economy is going to go down. It seems like the numbers are holding up, but again, government does distort numbers, and I don't have the details for you, but it's interesting nonetheless to see what Hansen says. Most economists lectured that trade deficits do not really matter. And of course, in Austrian economics, trade deficits don't matter because those are going to be corrected through currency exchange. And, for example, if a country buys a lot of our goods and they use dollars to buy them, right? So we have a lot of dollars and they have a lot of our goods. Well, those dollars then have to be spent somewhere, or they have to be exchanged for the currency. So the trade deficit really doesn't matter, again, because that invisible hand of international economics is going to take care of that. Government really doesn't need to be involved. This is a huge fallacy. And again, this is why Trump is not a libertarian. In fact, Trump is not very intellectually knowledgeable on economics or anything, really. He just has good street instincts. But he's basically saying that, and this is true, guys, and this is something that we have to give Trump credit for in the political game. He says most Americans recalled that the mere threat of tariffs and Trump's jawboning had led to several $1 trillion in promised foreign investment, at least some plans to relocate manufacturing and assembly back to the United States. Of course, manufacturing certain things here, like steel, have a national security implication. So I'm on the fence on a lot of this stuff. I know that government can screw things up, but it remains to be seen what the long-term implications of this will be. And as Keynes said, in the long term, we're all dead. So did any of y'all see the interview with RFK Jr. and Tucker Carlson? I have not seen it. I want to see it, and we'll probably talk about it tomorrow in the podcast. But I'm really, really happy about the small progress, but it is progress, that RFK Jr. is making in the health scene in the United States. He's already gotten some companies to take out the dyes in the foods. I know Nestle is going to do it by 2027. He's gotten some restaurants like Popeyes and Steak and Shake to start cooking their fries in beef tallow. I remember when the propaganda came out in the 80s and 90s that seed oils were the way to go and that fats were bad. Now we're just back full circle, and I see that they're now selling these protein chips. I wanted to actually look into that as a trend. I've seen several people buying these protein chips. It is a new fad, and I even commented to someone that Dr. Atkins would be very happy now in his tomb if he knew that this stuff was going mainstream. It seems like what they called us crazy for 20 years ago is now mainstream. And so RFK is correcting the food pyramid. And again, he's not making as much progress as I had hoped that he would make, but I'm still giving him more time on that. I hear that he pissed off a lot of the medical establishment people just with this interview with Tucker today that said some quote unquote crazy things, which of course should be spot on. And so I know that over time he's going to make strides. Of course, they can't do everything. There's only so much a government committee can do. A few weeks ago, he fired the entire council that recommended whether or not to put vaccines on the schedule. And a lot of people say, oh, this is horrible, and these were scientists. Guys, I want you to watch this. I found this video on X. This is a few years ago. Look at how these people make decisions. It will make your skin crawl. Watch this video.
Is there any comment on using this vaccine at the same time with other adjuvanted vaccines?
We have no data to make a recommendation one way or the other.
Why is she wearing a uniform?
So just to sort of put this in context of other vaccines, whilst preclinical studies were not done using
Another
these vaccines
uniform.
simultaneously, our general approach to immunizations is that they can be given at the same time in different limbs.
Just like that, no proof.
Are multiple adjuvanted vaccines used in Europe or other markets?
Dr. Ward, do you want to comment?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I think unless there's any further discussion, we will take a vote. on this recommendation?
I want to remind everyone to please
Look at
check
their
your,
faces.
voting whatever machine thing.
Voting
and,
whatever.
I don't know what it is. Voting is open.
Thank you very much. So the voting is
Jeez.
completed,
Good
and
God.
it is unanimous to support this recommendation. Thank you
What
all.
the heck, man? So they're saying, oh no, we did not recommend in Europe, or we do not know that Europe recommends or any other country recommends giving this hepatitis vaccine with other vaccines just in different arms. Do you have any information on that, Dr. So-and-so? No. And then they vote 100% to recommend that vaccine along with other vaccines in the schedule. This is corruption writ large. And so Kennedy has put Dr. Malone, Robert Malone, as well as other skeptics, not even vaccine skeptics, but people who are actually going to purely follow the science. It surprised me. It surprised a lot of people that they did recommend the RSV vaccine for infants, but they did, as a token gesture, ban this mercury preservative in flu shots. I think it's a good step forward. I wish they would just go and just full scale retest and root out a lot of these shots, but I know they can't do that just yet. So I have high hopes for RFK. Says RFK Jr. is bringing psychedelics to the Republican Party. Republicans now support counterculture drug research, while Democrats have become cautious about unproven medical treatments. Of course, unproven means unbacked by the big pharma-backed studies. So, driven by a desire to help ex-service members with mental illness, GOP lawmakers led a failed campaign last year to persuade the Biden administration to approve psychedelic drugs. And while I don't advocate the use of drugs, I've never used psychedelic drugs. Why are they so afraid of it? Why are they banning it? If it's something that's victimless, that's something that a consenting adult chooses to do, why are they banning it? Especially for people who have high stress and for whom other methods haven't worked. I think it could be a great experiment. Let's see if this works. But no, legislators think that they need to ban this and make our decisions for us. That's why libertarianism is about allowing people to be adults. And that's why I'm a libertarian, because I say do what you want as long as there are no victims. The main tenet of libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. If someone takes psychedelics, is that an aggression against someone else? No. So what business is it of you legislators to tell people what they can try? A longtime believer in psychedelics' potential to help people with illnesses like post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, despite the lack of supportive evidence, which is baloney. There's a lot of supportive evidence. There have been a lot of experiments done. Kennedy is ramping up government-run clinical studies and telling the disappointed lawmakers that doctors will be prescribing the drugs soon. I think that's a good step forward. Again, I love RFK Jr.'s persona. I love the fact that he's just out there promoting alternative treatments. I like the fact that he's promoting a healthy lifestyle for the country. And I like the fact that he's at least giving some token resistance to the vaccine schedule. I'd like to see more. I'd love to see more. And we will wait and see what happens with that. One thing I don't like, guys, and it's a double-edged sword. He said that we want every American to be wearing wearables, and that's things like insulin or blood sugar meters that you wear, like Dexcom and Freestyle Libre. That's things like watches that you wear that report to you your heartbeats. Theoretically, this could be good, but what are the privacy implications? And what are the implications when another administration comes in and says, we want to track everyone's body, and then we want to regulate their behaviors by force based on that? I think it's a nightmare. Most of MAHA has risen up against this. If you look on Twitter, if you look at the comments, I am definitely not for this. I think it's foolhardy. Now, is it better than these people spending? I see people spending $500 a month, $1,000 a month on these Mounjaro and Zepbound, which are known to have side effects like thyroid cancer. That those are warnings actually on the inserts of these medications. Do we know the effects that these are going to have on the population? Because now almost every doctor is prescribing these GLP-1s. I don't know. I think it would be better for someone to spend $85 a month on a wearable that'll tell you what your blood glucose is doing in any moment, rather than take these GLP-1s. But again, it's a double-edged sword, and I'm conflicted on that. I'm not going to wear a wearable, and I definitely don't want that to become something of a policy. That's just my opinion. So that's one area where RFK Jr. and I disagree. I've seen articles that Mr. Trump is now trying to bring Israel and Gaza to the negotiating table. I think it's a very good thing. In fact, I believe if Trump can end the situation in Gaza, end the attacks on Gaza, if Trump can maintain the ceasefire between Iran and Israel, and if Trump could do something about this conflict that is still ongoing between Russia and Ukraine, I think he will deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. And again, for a libertarian, world peace is the most important issue. Murray Rothbard said nuclear disarmament is the most important issue, and world peace is the most important issue. It remains to be seen, guys. So tell me what you think. Comment on the podcast, put in the podcast what you think. Tell me what you'd like us to talk about, any guests that you'd like to us to have on. Right now, this is basically just a free-form podcast where we're talking about current events, and we're having some fun. And so let us know, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy the channel, please do subscribe, like the video, share the video, because we're trying to do this a few times a week, maybe 3-4 times a week. So very soon, guys, this is Javier with Javier Novoa Podcast. Peace out.
The Javier Novoa Podcast. Prosperity, liberty,